Okay, about to start. I'd like to call the regular scheduled February 18th meeting of the Board of Finance to order. First order of business is public forum, limited to 2 minutes on any agenda items. Anyone who wishes to address the board in public forum? Hearing none, let's move on to item 2. 2.1, regular meeting minutes, January 27th. Just for those of you who are the first time at a Board of Finance meeting, there was also minutes at there's the public forum at the end of our meeting as well. Item 2, approved minutes, 2.1, regular meeting minutes of January 27th, 2014. Is there a motion?
So moved.
How about a second?
Second.
Comments, questions, additions, deletions? Mike, looked like you had a couple things circled there, no?
I did.
Well, give me a couple minutes.
Yeah, give me a second.
All right, anybody else have any?
I have one on
Jeff.
the bottom of page 2.
Yep.
Mr. Ailes asked about the $4,500 expenditure to Rain Pop. I think it's actually called Brain Pop.
It is. That was one of them. Now I'm finding them all. Page 5, there's a typo.
That's fine.
Third paragraph, or actually fourth line paragraph, where it says the new high school. High school.
Nice.
And on the last page, for clarification purposes, I want to make sure it's in the minutes. The first line, Mr. Ailes said they had a meeting January 14th and continue to weigh different cost scenarios, as opposed to somebody thinking it's design scenarios. They're done with that.
Yep.
And I believe I had mentioned that it was with and without the Black Box Theater, because that's the cost scenarios they're looking at right now. And that's all.
Okay. Anybody else? Ken?
I just wanted an explanation of something that Linda mentioned. It's on page 2, middle of the page. Ms. Trudeau said she believed the calendar approval does not have any school situation for Veterans Day, but as things move toward a more regional schedule, what was the meaning of regional schedule? What's a regional schedule?
Dr. Freeman?
The 6 area RESCs there, the statewide resource areas, have been encouraging school districts to collaborate. So essentially, we create a regional template, and then all the districts within the region try to align as closely as we can to that template. It allows us to have the same April break, the same winter break. You try to get start and stop times as close as you can, and to a degree, we try to align days for professional development opportunities so that we can collaborate and share resources. Most holidays are the same, but Veterans Day is an example of one where some districts are in and some are off.
Anything else?
No, no for me.
All in favor as amended?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained? Correspondence, a little light on correspondence this month. As the Standing Building Committee didn't have a quorum, and the Pension Committee meeting is actually tomorrow, correct? Item 4, review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for January 2014. Linda? Wait, yeah, this side might be easier rather than trying to, all right. Why don't you sit on this side so the GCTV can pick up the conversation. Good evening, Chairman Blas. What would you like to bring to our attention, Linda?
Well, as you can see, we're halfway through our fiscal year, and we are roughly very close to 50% expended. I think the 2 specific things I'd like to just highlight to the board is, first is that we are very optimistic that we will once again be able to complete our fiscal year within the appropriated amounts. As always, there is some variation in the actual expenditures from the appropriated amounts to some degree, but nothing major, and on balance, we will be within the appropriated amounts. We're quite confident of that. The people who've read the report closely may say, well, gee, you're very close on this special ed tuition. The good news is that for the first time, probably, I don't know how many years, we are going to be within the appropriated amount on the special ed outplacements, the tuition line. That line in this report does not reflect the fact that we will be getting a state grant in the area of $700,000 to $800,000 approximately in the end of February. And so that is not reflected yet in this report. Ms. Trudeau was working before our last meeting to make the predictions on the outplacements and determine whether there will be an expected overage in that line, and we're confident that there is not going to be to any material degree. And so what we told you last year, and I think this will be part of Dr. Freeman's discussion as well a little bit later, what we told you was that we would be able to see some savings in that tuition line with the increased investment in district staff, and in fact what we said was going to happen has happened.
We had asked Linda at the last meeting to provide us with a kind of rough comparison of outplacement versus the development of the special ed establishment within the house, how the two balance out, because there has been reference to a great deal of savings. I think I've seen the number.
I think Dr. Freeman's going to talk in some detail about that this evening as part of the budget presentation for next year, because that is...
I was thinking of this year. What's happened this year?
In terms of there are a reduced number of outplacements.
Right.
I think it's going to if you could just defer on that, that will be a major
Okay.
part of what we talk about.
I'm happy to combine the two when I make the comments
Good.
decision.
Is that it for?
Unless the board has
Precursor?
questions.
I did have a question relative to tuition. We still anticipate that $700,000 to $800,000 state grant will bring us close to $900,000 to $1 million. But your January left unexpended. Your January run rate was about $780,000. Was that unusually high?
It's timing.
Timing?
Yeah, there was some annual payments that came in January, so January was a little bit higher.
Right.
The amount that we're talking about for the excess cost grant is only the amount for what we would receive in February. We will receive more at the end of May.
Okay.
So it's just going to be over $1 million.
That was my question. Was
Right.
that $700,000 to $800,000 the excess cost?
Yes, it's the excess
Okay.
cost grant, and it's only 75% of the excess cost grant we get at the end of February.
Okay.
Is that an annual grant, or how does that work?
Yes, we get it every year, and it's based on the expenses that we have for outplacements and transportation for special education students.
Certain
Certain
high cost special education students. I think the formula now, at least the statutory formula, is if it takes more than 5 times our net per student expenditure, average per student expenditure, to outplace a student, that would be a relatively high needs student, obviously, then the state is statutorily committed to reimbursing the district for all amounts above that 5 times the average per student cost. But although that is the statutory requirement, the state doesn't always fund the statutory requirement. So it's one of these fill statutes that says within available appropriations, the state will reimburse. And in fact, then they don't appropriate the money. So it's always been partially funded to one degree or another. It's actually improved some over the last few years, but it is still not fully funded.
It'll be about 75% of what we should be getting.
And the town makes up the remaining 25% of the cost?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, we're statutorily obligated under federal special education laws to provide certain services, regardless, not regardless of the cost, but there are some services that we just can't provide in district for some particularly high needs children. And so we are, under the law, under the statute, we do have to educate them out of the district or substantially change the way we deliver services in the district. And so for those particular high needs children, and there are about, I think, 30-something that are outplaced right now approximately, we do get some rebate or grant from the state. It doesn't quite approach what the promise was when the special education laws were enacted back in the early 70s. It was going to be 40% funded by the federal government, and now it's, at least for us, it's around 1%, but in any event.
That's not the biggest piece of, oh, sorry, we lied. I think the ECS formula probably takes the cake there.
Thank you.
It's, we're the end of the line
Exactly.
on those issues.
Robin Hood theory, as we've talked about in the past. Other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple on your Operations Committee meeting from January 13th, your minutes. One item on page, well, it's item 6. This is really just a clarification. It's regarding the health insurance reports. It says Linda reported that the projected surplus deficit is 884. I mean, is that surplus slash there's a deficit, right?
There's a deficit, no, that's
Okay.
correct. We've talked about that, I think, every month, and we're going to continue to.
Right.
Yes,
Okay,
that
so it's
is.
just a clarification. The minutes were a little bit just confusing.
I mean, and we can talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing moving forward on that during the budget part.
Understood. And I recognize that, and I saw the budget notes, so
Right.
I'll wait for further questions at that point on that. The one item right above that is probably another simple explanation, too. It's an accounting issue apparently in this 457 deferred compensation plan. The language of that item is just a little bit confusing to me. There's some required change. If I read this thing, it's hysterical.
I don't have the minutes in front of me, but
It says to amend the plan by changing the normal retirement age for the purpose of the final 3-year prior to normal retirement age catch-up option from 70 and a half to 65. Whew. I read it like 3 times, I still wasn't quite sure.
The original plan document has the retirement age at 70 and a half. We were trying to change our plan document to change the retirement age.
And this is as a result of some sort of external accounting requirement, or is there some financial reason we're doing that? I mean, what's the purpose behind it?
It's to bring the plan in line with some other standards that we have from our, the 403B and 457 advisor, and to update the plan document for some other changes that have occurred since the original plan was enacted back in 2004, 2008.
And is that something that's likely to affect the town, or does it just affect the individuals involved?
It's just for our 457 plan. So we have a few employees that participate in a 457 plan, and it's just changing our plan document.
I think the question is it going to change the funding requirement because you've dropped the age, which is going to change the actuarial anticipation?
No, this is.
this is not the funded, this is not town money.
This is not
Okay.
town
That's my
money, this is the employees', employees' contribution only,
Only, okay.
only employee
Not the
contribution.
town's piece, okay.
Then there was an item regarding, evidently there was some discussion regarding another turf field at some point. This is in your general minutes, the February 10th minutes. Oh, no, excuse me, January 13th minutes of the, apparently the entire board. But the field, and I guess somebody... What page?
This is the, I know
Page
what
7.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
This
there was
is,
some
I was
discussion
act-
about another turf field.
Well, this is the liaison report to the Guilford High School Building Committee. This
Yes.
is not an issue that's in front of the Board of Education right now. The High School Building Committee is doing an evaluation, as I understand it, of whether it makes economic sense to put in a second turf field at the high school as opposed to re-engineering and installing a new genuine, what do you
Grass.
call it? Real turf field,
Grass.
grass
Real
field. I guess they
natural
could call
grass.
it grass, that would be one thing I could do.
That's an option.
Yeah, that's an option. That, they have not asked our opinion on that.
Okay.
The high school building committee has not asked our opinion on that. I have suggested to various members of the committee that I think it would be prudent to seek not only our opinion, but this board's and the Board of Selectmen's
Right.
on that. I think where they are, though, as I understand it, is they're in the information gathering stage to see what the, obviously, it's a different analysis if it's half as expensive, the same price, or twice as expensive to do one versus the other. We just have to know what as a town, we need to know what those numbers are.
And certainly whether the decision to do install a natural field and then decide 5 years down the line that the turf field was a better idea, it wouldn't make any sense. I mean, if there's a moment here where everything's torn up and things are getting put in sort of new, essentially, I understand why they're visiting the question. But the thing that really caught my eye is, and I appreciate it's not your board and it was a report, but I'd be interested to hear this further as this discussion takes place. What caught my eye is that the preliminary indications are that the costs end up being the same as a natural field over time. And it just wasn't my recollection from the last time we visited the question over the
It's a different issue,
turf
though.
field.
The last time we, as a town, the last time we
Yeah.
visited the turf issue field, it was an installation of a retrofitting, if you will, of the existing, the football field at the
Yeah.
high school. The field, as I understand it, I'm not on the high school building committee, and I did go to this meeting, but, you know,
Okay.
I don't get all the paperwork necessarily for every single meeting before the meeting. As I understand it, there is a substantial amount of engineering that has to be done to install a field, whether it is turf or grass.
Right.
And there is engineering that's going to have to be done on the new site, on the site to be able to install a grass field. That's going to have a cost. Now,
Sure.
what you don't want to do is pay that cost to engineer for a grass field, and then you're right, in 5
Yeah.
years say, you know what, we really need to look at it. It's not working for whatever reason, we have too much use, so we need to go to look at doing a turf field. That would be the worst case scenario, and that's just not something I think anybody would support. But the question still boils down to engineering costs of a grass field versus engineering costs of a turf field, the lifetime costs of both, the maintenance costs of both. You know, I think the turf field at the high school, notwithstanding all of the, you know, the debate, if you will, about it years ago, has turned out to be just a tremendous advantage to the.
You get so much more usage out
Yeah,
of it, too, which is
it's in use all the time.
Right.
And especially with the weather we've had, it really, in retrospect, it was a good decision to put it in. Whether it's a good decision here, I don't think that the Board of Ed doesn't have an opinion on it. We haven't been asked to take a position on it. But as I understand it, the high school building committee is trying to develop information.
Okay.
You
And
don't know the life of the turf field?
I'm sorry?
What's the life of the turf field?
I think it's approximately 10 years is what the manufacturer says, although,
We should be getting close on that.
yeah.
Well,
I
that's,
think
and that's just
it's-
to replace the carpet.
Yeah.
The other.
The underpinnings are okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but you know, there's all, if they say 10 years, it may well be 12 years or 14 years. It's going to depend on how well it was maintained and what the condition is and so forth. But that is something we're going to have to be looking at, the high school field, the existing high school field.
Now, Bill, I have a question about these minutes that you don't have in front of you, of course, but
Sure.
this subject is on all our minds. You know, given the experience with the healthcare costs,
Right.
there was a lot of discussion about seeking some other options.
Right.
And I know that probably takes some time, but has anything come of that thus
We,
far?
yeah, we're working, well, maybe, is going to be the best way I can answer it. We should talk about that again during the budget presentation, because that's going to have much more of an impact moving forward. But we are actually working, the problem is that there is a self-insured, relatively small pool. A fairly small number of high-end claims can have just a drastic impact on your budget. You know, we have a stop-loss, an insurance policy, where an umbrella, if you want to call it that. We're self-insured up to $225,000, and we have an umbrella policy or just regular insurance above that number. I think it's 225 is my recollection. The anecdote would it was 250, but I think it is 225 now. The problem is that it doesn't take a lot of really of serious illnesses to bump up to $225,000 in healthcare right now. It just doesn't. A series, you know, you can pick a few examples from your own personal experiences to know that it really, when you are self-insured and not anticipating an actuarially unusual number of claims, it puts us in the position that we're in this year, although 2 years ago, we were $1 million under what we thought the claims were going to be for the same reason. We are working very hard, though, at looking at alternatives, and we can talk about this some more during the budget cycle preparation. We are considering reevaluating our relationship with our current insurance advisor. And this all has to be done in conjunction with the town, by
I
the
was
way.
about
Yeah,
to
we're
say
not,
that.
we can't go off on our own on this. We are one town, this is one set of circumstances and one set of policies and practices, so we do have to work cooperatively. And Mr. Mazza and Dr. Freeman and our board have worked cooperatively in this area and will continue to do so. But we are looking at reevaluating our relationship with our advisor. We are looking at rebidding, getting quotes from a traditional insurance plan, which has some advantages and some disadvantages. We're just going to have to get the numbers again. We are looking at pricing going into the state program to see what their numbers would be. And we are looking at changing. We did get actually at least an informal quote to change our stop loss limit to lower it to $150,000. Now, obviously, the premium would be higher for that kind of coverage, but there is at least initially a possibility that the price that they're quoting us to lower our stop loss would actually result in a savings. Again, based on anticipated claims, which might be higher, might be lower. But the short answer to your question is yes, we're working very hard on getting some
I'm
alternatives.
encouraged that you're looking at every option.
I think it's also fair to say that the likelihood of us changing plans for the upcoming budget cycle is relatively limited.
Probably not the
I would
momentum
say
is not going in that direction.
I'd say it's greater than zero, but not an awful lot.
Although the stop loss issue may be
The stop loss,
affected.
exactly.
Yeah, and that's
What-
potentially,
What are the contractual obligations with our employees relative to the plan offering? Because I would assume that part of the negotiations includes the health benefits, so the plan that they have today needs to be mirrored moving forward, and, that will somewhat limit the types of responses or the variations in terms of the RFP responses.
yeah, that's not actually going to be that big of an issue, I don't think. The state program, for example, does match favorably with what we currently offer. That I don't think contractually would be an issue, but we do have to compare them side by side and see exactly what they look like. The regular, but it's quoted in the contracts. It's quoted off of an Anthem policy or plan, and so if we bid it with Anthem, we'd be comparing, one Anthem plan to the same Anthem plan.
Right.
The state plan is similar. They all have
Relatively similar.
a menu that you can choose from. I don't think that's going to be the
Do we
an insurmountable issue.
need to get sign off from the various bargaining units relative to changing the plan? I got a yes over here.
I think you probably would, but we're not there. We're not even
there yet.
We're not even close to there yet. We don't need any kind. I don't think we need any kind of a sign off for trying to changing the stop loss
I don't
number.
think
No, that's
No, that's
it has
internal
no
policy.
impact on the plan.
Other questions?
Yeah, I actually have one, and I suspect the answer is going to be wait for the budget presentation. I had some questions about the International Baccalaureate Program, and we hear that in the...
That is going to be sure. Yeah, we can talk about that during the budget presentation.
No, wait.
Anything else, warrants?
We will also
Mike?
be hearing about the technology integration specialist. I've seen that appearing in the proposal for such a position. We'll be hearing about that.
Well, we're going to be talking about what the priorities that made it through to the Board of Ed vote
Okay.
during the budget presentation, yes.
Okay.
Mike?
Somewhat of a related question that Linda sort of responded to before and Ken brought up. And again, I was looking at the warrants, and there were about 10 cases where there were, and I'll give an example. There's one particular, I think it's Giant Steps, and there's some substantial amounts there. And the question I kept on circling for all of the different, 10 different schools that are part of special ed is how long is that payment for and how many students? And Linda mentioned that it actually was a higher month than usual because of, I guess, Linda, you said that there were some annual payments that were made as part of that.
Right.
And I think Ken mentioned something about getting some sort of information regarding
It was in the minutes.
the outplacement. And I'm wondering, and I think we've asked for this before, but is there a way of getting, for the different vendors, the different schools that we send kids to, getting a list of either what those are and how often the payments are, or how many students are part of that? You said 30, but of course that 30 is spread out.
Correct.
And I'm assuming it's not 30 schools. I'm assuming it could be
No, there's some overlap.
15, 20 schools, and there's 2, 3 students that end up going to the same school. But I guess I was getting a little bit confused when I was looking at it. When you see a large payment, and then there's smaller payments, I'm kind of looking, are we going to get hit with this month? Are we getting hit with it monthly? I mean, without looking back at all the warrants, it can get a little bit confusing looking at all of
I
them.
believe before we've done a list of the facilities,
Yeah,
and
totally, anonymous.
Right,
Yeah,
and
I know
I
that.
don't know if it has types of services that they provide. I
The
don't-
the
I
more
don't
the more
know if it did.
identifying detail,
Yeah,
the
and I don't
riskier
even,
it gets,
it's not even the
obviously.
type of services, it's just the
Yeah.
vendor
right.
and how many students and how often we're.
Well, we've been down this road before,
Yeah.
and we've been cautioned about identifying even the number of students that are going to each one of these institutions. Relative to identifying the cost, my assumption is the cost varies by case based on the amount of attention or amount of instruction or the nature
does.
of the affliction that drives, or problem that drives that child to that program. I think it's fair to ask, for a description of what types of services those organizations provide. I'm just
Well,
going to
and-
challenge you, Mike, what are you going to do with
if
the
I-
information when you get it?
Yeah, if I could just remind the board that anybody who's outplaced is not outplaced because we feel like it. They're outplaced because of an individual education plan and IEP, and that is a requirement under federal law. So if it's interesting, I guess, but there's nothing, unless we are going to provide an equivalent service in district, it's not information that is going to affect any decision that we make.
No.
Well, it's just that, if I might add to what you're
Okay,
referencing.
yeah.
Just trading off. There are two sets of invoices here in the warrants that they're puzzling in the sense not that whether they're justifiable. I can assume with confidence that they are justifiable. But if you look at the item on page 38, one of the last items, youth villages, there's a figure there of $12,600. Is that a one-time figure? Is that a monthly figure? Is that an annual figure?
It's not going to be an annual figure.
I think we could, with some ease, put together a list of the schools with which we do business, or the schools where we have students currently placed. I would share Mr. Hovey's concern that, there's a number of situations where we're only going to have one student placed in that environment. And if we were to provide the place and the dollar amount, and the community recognizes that there's only one student placed there, I begin to worry that we're beginning to violate some privacy, and I worry then that now there's people far removed from the PPT table, the group that is legislatively put in place to make those decisions, who are beginning to wrestle. This is a lot of money for one student, and it places all of us in a position in which I don't think we want to be. The PPT is the body that is legislatively determined to make that determination. Not the principal, not me, not the Board of Education. Only that body can make that decision for that student. And so I would caution, but we could easily put together a list of vendors and information about those vendors with who we're currently doing business.
Could I respond to your question? Sure. What am I going to do with it? I guess when I'm looking at the warrants and I see a $10,000 payment and I see a $65,000 payment, my assumption is $65,000 is probably is an annual. And I see three or four.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
And there lies my question is, that could be, and there's 3 or 4 $65,000 3 or 4 times. So is that 4 students at that number annually, or is it quarterly, or is it, so to go back to the point, it's more who are the schools and the vendors we're using, and how often are we invoiced, or how often are we billed? The amounts are the amounts, the students are the students, the number, I just want to know, how often am I going to see $65,000 on the warrants? Am I going to see it quarterly? Am I going to see it annually? Is it,
As long as.
or does it vary? Or does it vary year to year?
With information.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can figure that out if you want to
I would just think it would make it
I'll talk to the
helpful as
administration
just,
about an appropriate form for that. Again, I'm a little, I'm trying to walk a pretty fine line, obviously,
No, I-
between giving you all the information that you're requesting, but also not doing something that's going to create an issue with either the state or the federal
the
government.
amount of times we are invoiced for the services vary literally,
Yes, oh, sure.
like, not even every year. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly, that it's changing. It's always, if it's always fluctuating, then that would be very difficult. But if
Well,
we know for the year, for the budget year, these are the 10 consultants we're gonna use, or vendors, and.
Well, any particular school even then, there could be a different child or set of children
A different
that
child
have different
in the school.
needs, different,
Yeah.
so,
Right.
Look
For
at
the-
this,
For the most part, a facility like Giant Steps, they bill twice a year. So you get 2 charges from Giant Steps. Other places like Youth Village do a monthly billing.
Oh,
So,
that's a monthly.
so we can look at them and say, kind of, go through, and they're usually pretty typical, but there are those odd occasions when, for some reason, a child is billed a little differently.
There will be divergence if for some reason we contract a service from that school, if we ask that school to conduct a portion of an evaluation or assessment for us. So we can give you standard billing cycles, I think, for each of those organizations,
Yeah, for the-
but there's going to be
yeah.
something unusual.
The tuition is usually pretty standard. It's some
Right.
of those other services that will sometimes
Yeah, you can see.
generate another
You can
invoice.
see with the Rehabilitation Associates on page 31 and 32, that's all over the district. Every school's involved in that.
Right.
So that but again, it just go back to my original question of where the balance is between what we're assuming, how that balances against outplacement and advisory services from the outside, what we can do. It's all within special education. I think we'd all like to be reassured that we are assuming a big chunk of the burden of special education internally, and that was the basis of the query I had a month ago.
Right, and Paul's going to address it during his,
well, I think I speak for everybody on the Board of Education, that our new special education director, Virginia Brown, has the full confidence of not only the board, but the administration and parents of special ed children. She is doing an outstanding job. She has absolutely got this program delivering better services in district at lower cost.
Great.
So we have nothing but positive things to say about the work she's done, and really everybody in the team.
And Ken, and Mike, I'm assuming here that this is not a question of the efficiency or the optimization of our spending in the special ed item, okay?
That's not
And
the issue.
it is going to be extremely difficult to do any kind of direct analysis to show the cost savings with the in-district versus the out-of-district, because at any given month, any given week, perhaps even any given year, it's potential costs that we're avoiding as opposed to real costs that we're avoiding that we can literally put our hands on. That's going to be the difficulty in pulling together, the true value of the in-house program. All right? Yeah, we can take the number of kids that are in there and what it would have cost them, all right? But it's the opportunity cost that we can't figure out that we're saving. So it's not, the documents that you guys are looking for are not going to be the panacea and show exactly what we're avoiding spending.
I'm not necessarily looking for in-house and the
Right,
difference
well, that
between
was
the
Ken.
placement.
I was sort of trying to address both.
All I was wondering was billing cycles and what we should be looking for when certain vendors invoice. And it's just, again, I was just looking at how often when I go through the warrants, am I going to see something quarterly, monthly, yearly? And then I could, whether it's refer to the list or whatever.
Probably figure out a reasonable way to do that.
And I don't want to break any laws.
Yeah, I just
Do any, or confident, yeah. confidence.
But I do want to emphasize the board is not, I take it, giving us any, it's not trying to tell us how those
Not
placements
at
should
all.
go. That's what I wanted to make
Not at
clear.
In fact, you know, at some of our previous, as our budget development meetings, I think you've heard this board is terrifically impressed with the results of the in-district stuff. And as we'll see later tonight, you guys are actually asking for $800,000 less in tuition in the upcoming budget than we had, than you had requested last year. So I don't, I'm going to speak for everybody here. I don't think that there's any question as to,
Right, I assume.
anything else to the Board of Ed?
Yeah, I hope this isn't right into the teeth of that same discussion. It's a lot simpler, I think. There's a number of payments to Michelle Ragazzini and Associates. I have a feeling that's going to end up being some sort of...
Where is that one?
On page 23, it's just a special service consult, consult services.
I believe that is a behavioral specialist. And that is an example of a situation that in past years could have been a student who was immediately outplaced. And instead this year we worked with holding that child, working around his needs, pulling in some outside consult and successfully holding on to him in district.
Fabulous.
Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
See you in a little while.
We'll be back.
You'll be back. Is there a motion to accept the bills for the Board of Education for the month of January in the amount of $4,844,343?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Any recusals? None? Okay. Item 5, review and approve report of expenditures for town government for January 2014. Good evening, Sheila. Are we going to start with revenue? Or you want to switch it around?
No, we'll start with revenue.
There you go, all right.
We'll switch it around. Okay. At the end of January, we've recognized 95.17% of our revenue budget. Sounds good. We were at 93.98% last year. And last year was a good year for revenue, so we're comparing one good year to another good year. That's important. Tax collections are at 96.14% compared to 94.98%. That's probably timing. There's still one more day to for the taxes that are current. February 1st is still a current day, and it's usually a big day because the escrows get recorded, many of them. So we really won't have a year-over-year comparison until the end of the month. I tried to look today, but we don't have revenue posted yet for February, the beginning of February, so I couldn't give you an update. Most of the departments, though, are really strong compared to budget. Most are ahead of last year. The bigger departments, building is quite a bit ahead. They're at, well, no, actually, they are ahead 66% versus 62.99%. They're strong. And assessor is the line I was just looking at, 75% versus 57, but it's a small budget. Ambulance is about where they were last year, and don't forget they're a month behind, so they should be at the 50% level. Youth and family is really doing well. It's 78% of budget versus 47 last year, and they should be at 50 as well. On the state side, we, based on the estimates that came out last week for the new budget and the projections for this year, it looks like we're going to get about $110,000 more than we budgeted, only because our budget last year came out before the state's budget. So that looks like another positive revenue budget line items. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a revenue question for you on the two lines for the Board of Ed and the State of Connecticut. I noticed a tremendous jump over last year. Is that just a
It's timing.
timing? or-
Yes, it's timing. The Board of Ed is going to be pretty much, there's going to be about a $15,000 difference on the Board of Ed side, and the town is going to be about $120,000 over. So, like I said before, it's about $110,000 net at the end of the year.
What accounts for that
Positive.
jump?
There was a new account that the state added for us for $75,000, which was, they called it a municipal aid adjustment, and we didn't budget for that. So that's the biggest one right there.
And again, the reason we didn't budget for that was decided after we had to go to
It was
referendum.
decided, I think, the last day of
Their
the budget.
session,
Yeah.
right, which would June 4th or June, whatever.
Now,
Mike.
the way these departments trend for revenue affect the forecast that you make for the next budget?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so this is kind of a deeper average, 5-year average, or?
And I think that was part of your package
It
too
was.
as well?
Yep. Yeah, the revenue summaries, the revenue, anticipated revenues were detailed in the package that came
And
out.
I think I put together
last
5 years.
Thursday, yeah. Just, you may want to take a look at one of the additional tabs on the bottom. She's got substantially more detail on the revenue side than just the bullet you have up top on the summary sheet.
One department that looked a bit down was engineering and public works. Now, again, not the biggest item, but they're down 50.85 versus 55.12. And I tried to go into the detail, and the biggest item appears to be the stump dump. I mean, is that down? Is there something going on? Is it just the weather?
No. I could take a look at it. 5% of 32,000 is, you
Just
know,
small numbers.
minimal. But I'll take a look at it and see.
So I want to go back to Youth and Family Services. I continue to be amazed at the development of that account over the past couple of years. If we do some straight line analysis on this, they're going to come in at roughly 150% of their revenue budget.
We continually speak to Lynn Landry about it, the director, and
It's there.
it's there, and they're very busy, and they're doing well in their collections, and their billing system is straightened out, and it's a combination of all the above.
And increased utilization as well, right?
They're at max.
Right, and increased utilization.
Finance is trending low. It's going to pretty much stay that way.
Yes, we.
There's gonna be no catch-up or
We cut the
anything.
budget in half for 15. I really,
How many basis points are we getting these days?
Kind of figured that.
one.
One?
And one more comment about the Youth and Family Services. Don't forget, in this current year, we added more hours to that department. too.
Anybody else? Questions on revenue? Expenditures.
Expenditures are obligated at 66.3% compared to 65.8% last year. Because we had storm expenses last year to try to equalize the percentages, we are, without the storm expenditures, at 66.3% versus 65.8%, still comparable to last year. There's a couple of things on revenue I could bring to your attention that kind of affect this report. Some positive, most positive, actually. For the building department, I think I talked about this last month, there's a $15,800 charge that's not budgeted for the part-time building official that's working on the high school. We're going to get reimbursed for that, so that will help there. Natural resources, this one, they have they're over by $10,400 in their tree maintenance and removal line item. There's an encumbrance there, though. It's a blanket encumbrance, I assume, with the storms, though. He may need to use them, but in previous fiscal years, we haven't used all the encumbrances, but that's driving that budget. And if he does need to use the entire blanket, we'll need to do a transfer because there's not really room in that account. General legal is actually only at 31% expended. We've only expended 15 out of $50,000, so we're doing really well in that line item. But the labor negotiations, we've spent 52 out of 40,000, so that's driving the expenditures in that department. We're just keeping an eye on it, and as we do every year. That's a department that's somewhat difficult to predict. For Public Works, the overtime is expended at 77% at the end of this, at the end of January in this report.
And we've had,
But you could see that we spent $28,000 on overtime in January, and we have $18,000 left at the end of January, so we are probably fully expended right now. We're a week behind, and I don't have last week's numbers in the payroll yet. But it won't be the first time that they've overexpended their overtime budget and still, covered it with their other surpluses and other line items.
are we gonna have difficulty with the road maintenance winter? I'm assuming sand and salt comes out of that account as well?
It does, but we're okay with materials. But we will be, I say okay, we'll spend up to the budget. But like the finance director said, we've had this before. The departments know very well that they have to work within their budgets. So one item might be over, another line item will be under.
A couple more things. On insurance, we have $108,000 budgeted to be reimbursed from the waste transfer station, and we have not done that adjustment yet, so that's contributing to the higher than
80%,
last
yeah.
year expended. That will be received and recorded. And revaluation at the bottom of the page. We don't have a budget. Well, actually, the budget that we have for $40,000 was at one point part of the capital budget, but now it's all part of the general fund, so now that's showing as a separate department. And the balance of the funds for that is in an assigned fund balance, so I'll be able to move that into this account, and it will show a net of zero
Okay.
at year end. But right now, it's showing $42,000 deficit.
Quick question. Board of Assessment Appeals. They've used very little of that. The question goes to process. When will those initial round of hearings start to happen? Because I think we bring additional resources on, and there's salary or
Yes.
stipends that are paid. Do we anticipate that's going to be in trouble because of the recent reval notifications that went out?
I don't believe so.
No.
I think that will be next year
As a
that we,
matter of fact, the request for review for Equifax, the assessor's company that we hired to do the reval, have been less than half of where it was the last reval period. So that gives us some indication that we're not going to have the amount of claims that we had last time.
Sheila, just a quick question. You mentioned natural resources, and again, I apologize for not asking this, one of the conversations we had over the last couple of weeks. When you talked about the tree account, there was, a couple of months ago, where I had made an inquiry about tree removal coming out of the sidewalk fund at one point. Do you remember that? There was a, I have to go back and find the minutes, but I'll give you a call on that. We had used some sidewalk money for tree removal.
most likely it was for trees that were uprooted.
Uprooting them?
Right.
Okay.
And that would be legitimate to
Gotcha.
charge
Okay.
sidewalk account. I can research that for
Yeah,
you,
thank you.
try to remember.
I'll shoot you an email. Anybody else? Any others?
Just have a question on the reval. It's coming out of the assigned fund? Is that, was it budgeted for 82,000?
It was, the assigned fund balance is money that we had left over from prior transfers into a special fund that no longer exists now. It's all part of the general fund pursuant to a new GASB requirement. So we budgeted only for what we needed to cover the entire cost of the reval, plus what's in the assigned fund balance.
Okay. You anticipated the movement? Okay.
Anything else? Special fund checks or? Okay.
I noticed about an $11,000 appropriation out of the special fund to the food bank, and I wondered whether is that a monthly advance? This can't be a monthly, I haven't seen that before.
No, and that's...
What's the total in there in that special fund? And how is it being expended in these times?
That is under the charge of social services, and they manage that account. We actually issue the checks, though, from our office. It's all donations, and then they pay bills as they see fit and as they have requests for. So really, to get further into it than that would be Tammy's would be able to help you, or I can get more information from her on exactly how they determine who they're donating to.
Right, and these are not taxpayer funds.
No,
not
they're all
involved in
donations.
Your contribution, yeah. Just wondering the extent of it annually. A lot of people in need.
Other questions? General fund, weekly checks, no? Warrants? Any questions on warrants?
No.
None? None? Medical benefits? Questions?
I could give you a brief, just an update on the large claims.
Okay, that would be helpful.
There are two that are over the stop loss by $297,000 we saved by having the stop loss in place.
Okay.
There are 7 more that are reaching 200,000. So we would have to spend about another $600,000 or $700,000 more just to reach the stop loss on those alone, just on those 7. So the nine claims at 225 is $2,025,000. That's a big percentage
Certainly is.
of our total claims.
That's 9 claims.
And the medical only is covered by stop loss, not the drugs or the dental. So there's other costs. There's $75,000 in costs associated with prescription drugs that are
as
not
well.
covered with these claims.
Just some back of the napkin analysis here, apropos of the conversation we had with Chairman Bloss. Our stop loss is 250,
225.
225. And we were looking at dropping that down to 150.
Well, we got
Quotes.
informal quotes on several different stop loss amounts.
Right, so the 2 that went to stop loss already would be 150,000. And the 7 that are at, let's call them at 200,000, would be 350,000. So that's basically 600,000. What's the what preliminary costs on the dropping the stop loss to 150,000?
It was probably close to 400,000.
We win, right?
I have 12 or 15 years worth of stop loss
Right.
analysis. So I'll get that together for everyone. So we can
Yeah.
take a look at it. But here again, it's past history, doesn't necessarily mean future.
Because it is not a predictor of the future. That's right. As my brokers want to say. I think he has to by law, right?
What is the copay that the municipality should pay, let's say on drugs, pharmaceutical products, or doctor visits and so forth? Is there a copay?
Copay meaning what you pay when you go to the doctor?
That's right.
It's, well, on prescription drugs, it's $5 for generic and $10 for brand name. And there may be a discount in certain plans for mail order.
That's a Cadillac plan. I don't have that.
It's a good
Well,
plan.
they're all negotiated, correct?
There's also, the employees also pay up to 20% of the cost towards the
Premium cost.
premium cost sharing.
Okay. Anything else on medical benefits? Building permits, golf course.
Bonded capital.
Next month, you'll have everything back to normal. I promise.
You always promise.
I do, but
And she delivers.
Yes, she does. She does.
All right. Anything further? Is there a motion to approve the bills for the town for the month of January in the amount of $2,090,753? Second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Abstain? Any recusals? None. Thank you, Sheila. Probably should have just kept you at the table, but the order is, item 6, receive proposed Board of Education budget for fiscal year 2014-2015. Audio-visual report.
I'm going to start off over here, Mr. Foley, if that's all right. I'll just say
That
a
is-
couple of quick words of introduction.
It's fine by me.
And then Dr. Freeman is going to do a very brief PowerPoint just to do some highlights and maybe frame some of the issues that we've been looking at. While I'm thinking about it, when we're talking about the stop loss, I just remember that assuming the people pricing these stop loss are doing it correctly with reasonable, rational economic actors, your odds of being over or under are
Very
exactly the same.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Because that's the way they're pricing it. So in any event, there's no magic bullet in the healthcare area. There's just not.
I
But-
understood. It's,
We started earlier on the budget this year than we ever have. We have had 4 different meetings with the public. We've had input sessions with teachers, with administrators, with parents. We've met as a board. I think really had some of the best discussions about education as part of this budget that we've ever had, or at least in my time that we've had. Because we are facing some very exciting challenges that everybody's probably read about in the paper, but we also, because of some good decisions that were made in past years, have got some really tremendous opportunities. I mentioned a little bit about the improvements in the special ed program that have led to giving us this year some flexibility, perhaps, to do some things that we've been trying to do for many, many years. But it's really not only some of those issues, but the steps that we've made in beefing up the line for maintenance of the buildings, that's gone up several times over the last few budgets, and we continue that trend in this budget because we are trying to, first of all, take care of the buildings that we have, and second of all, not bond things that really ought not to be bonded. We've renewed our commitment to internal professional development. Instead of sending teachers and administrators out to seminars and so forth, what we're doing now is embedding professional development actually in the program as part of the everyday experience at the various schools. We are investigating some very exciting possible programs like the International Baccalaureate program, which we can talk about a little bit later. But probably the one issue that has had the lion's share of both our deliberations and our discussions with the administration and the public has been the formal inclusion for the first time in our town's history of a full-day kindergarten program within a Board of Education approved budget. I'm sure we're going to talk about this some tonight. That's fine. I'm very prepared to do it. I brought all the studies that I looked at, and so I can, and then I think the entire board looked at, so we can talk about them. But this is clearly an issue that we have been, I have been discussing since the 80s. Representative Widlitz actually came to our board meeting this last week, and it said that when she was on the Board of Education, they looked at it and they just decided that they couldn't do it because of space limitations. And there's always been reasons why we didn't do it. But now the timing seems to be right. The arguments in favor of it seem to have significantly greater force than the reasons not to do it. So we are optimistic that, that this is a proposal whose time has come, and that we think that the administration and Dr. Freeman are going to do a good job, a positive job in implementing a program that actually will make a difference with student achievement. And then we will join the 28 of the other 31 top performing schools in the state that already have full-day kindergarten. But again, we can talk about that a little bit. Dr. Freeman does have some just summary slides that he wants to show you, and then we can talk about whatever the board wants to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Bloss. I will try to take you through very briefly. I won't, in fact, spend time on all of these slides. They are on our website. I'll just note that this budget, like all of the budgets that we prepare, is a value statement. It is an instructional statement. It grows from the school district's vision and mission. It is built on the priorities that this board adopts annually, but it builds on this year's set of priorities. And as we begin the process every year internally as an administrative team, we identify a series of budget priorities, and it is built on these priorities. This is a decision matrix through which we look at every request that goes into the budget. Most specifically, it is built on enrollment. We are only budgeting for the students that will be in front of us next year. While we have had some declines over the last few years, this year we project to be flat, essentially equal. We're going to be up by 6 students if our projections hold. Using all of that as foundation, meeting with all of the administrators and department leaders in the school district, taking an initial requested budget and boiling that down to the administrative proposal to the Board of Education, we came forward, the administrative team came forward with an initial proposal to the Board of Education for a budget request of $56,933,248. It was an initial proposed increase of 4.38%. The Board of Education then went into the process that Mr. Bloss has already detailed: public hearings, deliberation, meetings with the leadership team, meetings of the Board of Education, and made a series of adjustments, mostly in one direction. There was significant work done on insurance. We met with our insurance broker. I think for the first time ever, Board of Education members sat down with our insurance advisor. The town was at that meeting with us. There were significant adjustments made to our initial conservative recommendation around insurance. We looked at how we're using some positions that are particularly related to this full-day kindergarten proposal, and we're able to curtail medical benefit costs associated with those. There are increases in this budget for increased custodial time. The Board of Education reduced those request increases. We looked more carefully at our technology lease. There was an adjustment in another direction. If you have been following information out of the state, you've been listening to the concerns around new teacher and administrator evaluations. We did add some money back from my earliest request to be supportive of the administrative team in lifting the weight of the new evaluations. But ultimately, the Board of Education adjusted our initial administrative budget by lowering it by more than $760,000. For a Board of Education approved budget, that comes in at these numbers. The Board of Ed approved their budget at their recent meeting of $56,110,377. It's an increase over this current fiscal year of $1.6 million, for a percent increase requesting of 2.97%. When you take that budget and look at it visually, when you break out the major areas, you see that the significant increases fall into the areas of salary and medical insurance, employee benefits. I think, in fact, that the salary increase is an exceptionally reasonable increase. It includes the included investment, the increased investment in both special education staffing and full-day kindergarten staffing, as well as a newly negotiated contract with the teachers. And so that increase, while significant, I think is something about which to be proud. Remember that over 60% of our budget goes into salaries. It is a people-intensive business. There's been talk, and there will be continued talk, about what we're doing to control medical costs. We share this concern with the town, but you see that that is our most significant increase. I'm particularly proud of all of the other bars to the right. When you look at spending in purchased services, in supplies, and in capital, we've controlled those spendings, even though we're investing in the buildings. And when you look at tuition and transportation, Mr. Hoey, you're exactly right. We will never be able to firmly nail down costs avoided, but we've shown actual savings year over year in the areas of tuition and transportation, again, including the request for full-day kindergarten. This budget is built on efficiencies as much as it's built on our vision and our mission around instruction. I believe that we've generated significant efficiencies around salaries, around tuition, around transportation, and around the way that we supply classrooms. To give one of those broken out, and this slide is only for the purpose of illustration. It actually combines across 2 budget years, and we did that intentionally. In this current budget, we transferred some monies out of tuition and into salary. We added 5.5 teaching positions and an administrative position in this current budget to support the work that we're doing with special education. That was without increasing our budget. The budget was approved in April. We made these adjustments late in the year. We did it within budget. What we're saving in tuition is offsetting those staff investments. There's additional investment this year. There's an additional special education teacher that we're adding. But to show the order of magnitude, our tuition request this year is going down $823,000 over the current budget request. The transportation decrease related only to special education, this does not include a transportation reduction related to kindergarten, is going down $490,000. When you rough out the staffing expenses over 2 years, we're at approximately $500,000. So just in really broad numbers, but when you back out the investment in staffing, you still recognize a savings of over $813,000. And that cannot account for costs avoided. I was in a classroom last week with a student who has recently moved into our community. She does not live in the Lakes District, but she is part of a district-wide program that we've put in place at the Lakes School. She's in that school, she's being supported, she's doing very well, and 18 months ago she would have been an outplacement. Without that district-wide program that we had pulled together, we had no capacity to support this child. She would have required an outplacement. So it's both real savings, but there's also costs avoided that we can't talk about, or that we'll never be able to firmly nail down. And at the same time, there are parents who are coming to speak at Board of Education meetings and writing emails to Board of Education members telling them that it's the best year their child has ever had. I honestly believe, and I agree with Mr. Bloss, we've improved performance and generated these efficiencies. This budget is not only about efficiency, however. There are investments in this budget. This budget continues to be a forward-looking budget. One of our priorities was to expand opportunities. And so in this budget, we do have investment. The most significant is the full-day kindergarten. The cost of providing full-day kindergarten to every child in the school system next year will be $462,500. Initially, when we brought this forward, we were north of $500,000. We've worked with our administration. We've visited other schools. The Board of Education has looked at this number, and we've brought it below $500,000 for that particular investment. Mr. Bloss talked about the local job-embedded professional development. We've worked well with coaches in this system, instructional experts who work in the system supporting teachers and teacher work every day. We are currently at 6 of those positions. We would like to add a math coach. It is targeted toward the middle levels. This coach would continue the practice of embedding professional development locally, but this one's particularly targeted towards the emphasis that we have seen around mathematics instruction as we shift to the new Common Core state standards, and particularly at the middle level. As students transition into algebra, that is really a pinch point, and that is where our teachers need the most immediate support. We had great success when we commissioned an outside study to look at our services around special education. We're going to require some of that outside assistance this year. We're setting aside monies to provide both a new enrollment study. We're coming to the end of our 10-year enrollment projection that was commissioned some time ago. But we also want to look at how we're supporting some of our highest achieving students, the students who are really achieving at the high end of the scale, and are we meeting their needs and challenging them every day. Instructional materials, again, as we shift into the Common Core and as we look at meeting the needs of these highest achieving students, we need to differentiate material selection more often. And at times we need the ability to purchase something that may not be on the shelf because we have a child who has gone through what's on the shelf already. And we want to put these monies aside. We have line items like that for special education expenses. We have never had a line item of that nature specifically identified for our highest achieving students. There were some questions about the International Baccalaureate program. Really briefly, an International Baccalaureate program is a high school program. It's a high school diploma program. There's also middle-level opportunities, but at this point we're looking at a high school program. It's most easily compared, the closest analog is the AP program, so students who take advanced placement courses at the high school. The International Baccalaureate program is similar in that it is a series of rigorous courses that students can sign into to challenge themselves more deeply. It's different in that it has a firm international foundation. It was in fact started by folks working internationally and moving frequently, ambassadors, and needing to have a common standard in international schools. The fact is they didn't just establish a common standard, they set an incredibly high bar. It's a rigorous program, it's a challenging program, and it is a way to think about adding another layer of rigor and a different way of approaching rigor at the high school level. It aligns nicely with the values that we have been building towards with the principles of learning that we adopted some 7 years ago. It aligns well with the Common Core state standards and the direction in which that is moving. It doesn't replace an AP program. It's sort of a separate option. It's a different offering, and students can take AP courses, they can take honors courses, they can take IB courses. The monies that we provide here would be to continue some training that we have begun this year. The GFFE this year supported an opportunity for a number of our teachers to participate in international baccalaureate training, professional development. We would have to decide about this time next year if we were formally going to pursue entering into the International Baccalaureate program. That would involve an application. We would have to be accepted. We would have auditors from the international community come and visit our school. We would have to gain admittance to be able to say that we offered an International Baccalaureate diploma. These monies provide for the continued training so that our teachers can learn more about the program, and at the same time, we need to begin a more vigorous public conversation about this. We need to include our parents in this conversation, particularly the parents of current middle school students, because as we move forward, that would be the group that would have the first opportunity to move into this program. So this is not a commitment, this is the opportunity to continue to pursue, and the fact is, one way to look at this is whether we choose to pursue the International Baccalaureate program or not. It is universally recognized as some of the highest quality professional development that high school subject-specific teachers can participate in with a deeply rooted international focus. So even if this becomes a one-time investment, I still feel it's a valuable professional opportunity for our teachers at the high school. Mr. Bloss mentioned there's continued investment in site improvements. You'll notice not at the same level that we've invested over the last 2 years, but we look to invest an additional $39,000 into our site improvement line. That's our local maintenance of the buildings, and an investment into an additional custodial position. We're looking to add a half-time custodial position at Adams. We continue to be challenged by water issues at that building. We need to care for that building properly if we're going to continue to stretch its life. It gets a lot of public use, and it's one of our most challenging locations. And a half-time maintainer position, a maintainer who can be on third shift, who could work when the classrooms are empty, doing some of the in-house repairs and small ball repairs that need to happen on a continual basis. The total investment then is $799,000. And while I really work to avoid one-to-one comparisons in a budget, because a budget is not about cutting one place to fund another place, it is worth noting that the $799,000 in new investments is significantly below the reductions that are achieved when you look at the reductions in both tuition and transportation combined. And just to break out one investment in the same way that we broke out one efficiency, full-day kindergarten. $462,500 is achieved by doubling the number of teachers we have in kindergarten currently. We have 12 sections in kindergarten, but they're covered in half days. So we have 6 full-time teachers to cover 12 half-day sessions. To extend that to be 12 full-day sessions, we would need to bring in 6 new teaching positions. As kindergarten moves from half-day to a full-day experience, we propose supporting the classroom teacher with a paraprofessional. Currently, we have no paraprofessional support. We are proposing giving each teacher a half-time paraprofessional, a person who would be an extra set of hands in the classroom during the times that are most targeted towards academics, during the time that we're focused on reading and mathematics instruction. So to go from no paraprofessionals to 12 half-time paraprofessionals requires 6 full-time equivalents, 12 half-time positions. We need to purchase some additional appropriately sized furniture. We need to stretch instructional materials. Right now, one teacher uses the same set for both of her classes. We will need to have sets for everybody. There's money for professional development. There's an offsetting savings in that by going to full day, students ride the AM and PM buses. There's no more need for a midday bus run. We are projecting class sizes to be approximately the same. We expect there may be some increase in class size as families who are currently seeking private school for full day coverage may come back to us, but we believe that that will fall within board limits. We are projecting class sizes of 16 to 19 for a total cost of $462,500 to add the full day kindergarten. Staffing in the full budget. With full-day kindergarten, with the full-time math coach, there's also going to be an additional special education teacher needed. We're looking to increase by 8 certified teaching positions this year, but making enrollment adjustments, we are able to reduce by 2.5 teaching positions in other locations. So while we're projecting to go up 8, we're reducing 2.5 in other locations. Again, I mentioned the 1 custodial position that we're looking to add, and the 6 full-time aides or the 12 part-time aides for kindergarten. These positions carry different costs. Comparing a paraprofessional to a veteran teacher is not going to be the same in cost, but if you're looking at positions and bodies, we're asking to go up by 15 positions that don't exist this year. 12 of them are directly related to the full-day kindergarten. We're reducing by 2.5 in other areas by looking carefully at enrollment. I'll remind you all of that.
Back to that for just a quick second.
Absolutely. No, it's okay.
All right, the 15 net is really a net 12 and a half? Is that what we're
Yes.
saying? Okay.
Yep. I'm showing increases and I'm showing decreases. And one of the reasons for doing that is that there's a very intentional decision that's part of this. Should we choose as a community to move forward with full-day kindergarten? The Board of Education has included that. 12 of those positions are related to that one decision. Were it not for that decision this year, staffing would be essentially flat. We're making a thoughtful and an articulated decision to include that in this budget. And that's really what this slide was intended to communicate. So all of that being said, flat enrollment, a focus on not just maintaining our program, but continuing to challenge ourselves and improve our program, doubling one of the class offerings that we have currently. One of our 13 class sizes is doubled in this budget. It's built on efficiency and looking carefully at how we distribute our resources. It is a bottom line budget increase of just below 3% that we are moving forward. And just because I end every presentation with this, and we get positive results. This is not about a mediocre school district. This is about a group of students that I would put up against any other students any day by any measure, by standardized academic test scores, by graduation rates, by college placements, by our continuing education rate, by the success of our students who graduate from college on any performing stage or any athletic field. We provide a quality education to the students of this community, and I think the community deserves to feel proud about that. I certainly do. And I'll be happy to join Mr. Bloss for any Q&A portion of this.
Well, we'll probably reserve a significant portion of our questions for the Board of Finance hearing. Certainly, we can entertain a few at this point. Ken, I think you had raised your hand.
I did. I'm a little bit confused about the relationship between the Advanced Placement Program and the International Baccalaureate, how they coexist. What is that organizing structure that runs or that coordinates the International Baccalaureate? You say we have to apply to them. Who are they? Where are they? How many districts in the United States are affiliated with them?
Those are all questions that off the top of my head, I don't have specific examples for, or specific answers for, but there are regional organizations that exist within each country. So to access the training, we sent teachers to Florida because Florida has a particularly strong network. There are international baccalaureate schools in New York State. We've been to visit 2 in Long Island. It is essentially very much the way that students at the high school have a palette of selections now. Students can choose what level course that they're going to challenge currently. They can choose to take courses that earn early college credit. They can choose to take AP courses. This would offer an additional choice onto that palette. Students could choose to take individual IB classes, or they could choose to actually challenge an entire IB diploma, which means that not only would they graduate with a Guilford diploma, but they would graduate with a Guilford diploma that was recognized by the International Baccalaureate program. Colleges are beginning to ask on applications for your AP credits as well as your IB credits. I went to a college weekend with my 16-year-old this weekend, and AP and IB were talked about repeatedly in the same breath. In some ways, it's comparable to the SAT or the ACT. They achieve the same thing, but they're 2 different ways of getting there. And some students perform better on an SAT, other students perform better on the ACT. IB has a slightly different instructional philosophy than AP courses do. AP courses continue to be fairly traditional, highly rigorous, fast-paced courses. The IB program takes a slightly different approach. To achieve the IB diploma, you have to write a high school thesis that is scored by a local teacher as well as somebody from the IB program, and you have to pass your thesis. There's a required course on the theory of knowledge, how the human brain works and how we learn, and maybe a higher focus on problem solving and application, interdisciplinary focus than AP may currently have, although AP is moving in that direction. One of the schools that we visited in Long Island has a very healthy AP program and IB program functioning together. When they first introduced IB, there was some drop-off in AP enrollment, and now after 10 years, they see both their AP enrollment higher than it was 10 years ago and an enormous enrollment in IB. That's not everybody's experience, but many schools have both of them happening concurrently in a very healthy program.
So they operate separately?
Yes, except the students can cross over. Some students, we will have students who have some AP classes on their transcript and some IB classes on their transcript.
Are we getting inquiries from the colleges about this International Baccalaureate?
Many colleges now have the IB component on their application. There's a place for you to enter whether or not you have...
Many colleges.
More and more. It's a growing number. Not as many as AP. It's not as universal as it's not as common as AP here in the States at this time.
But these are discussions that we're just going to have as a community. You know, I did one of the field trips to Northport, Long Island, and talked to the program administrator there, and what his take on it was that the International Baccalaureate students, the program appealed to a different style of learning, a student who benefited from a different style of learning. It's much more into the critical analysis, problem-solving, application, whereas AP does tend to be a ramped-up, a more intense traditional method. You know, the International Baccalaureate program is arguably more consistent with what we've been trying to do in the Principles of Learning, which is to foster critical thinking and application of knowledge, in rather than just learning as the end. But we're just not ready as a community to commit to doing this. However, the board believes that it's a good idea to continue to explore it. And this may be something, Frank, I think one of the more exciting things about this budget is the outside evaluation for high potential learners. And where we had such a good experience with the special ed report the Futures Report a couple of years ago, that why not do the same thing in this area too? It may well be that that report says, you know what, the IB program is a terrific thing to do, and for your demographic, it's a great alternative. Or you may say, you know what, it's not worth it. You'd be better off putting your resources into something else. So I think as a board, we've got an open mind about it. There is a lot of excitement. I will tell you, there is a lot of excitement about this among the faculty at the high school, and they are, at least the ones that are communicating with us, are indicating that they think that it's a very good program. Whether it's something that we're going to recommend to the town or not, we're just not there yet because we need to have the conversation with the town.
It is worth noting that this request has come from the grassroots through the high school. So this request came from a group of interested teachers. They wrote a grant. They received support from their principal, and that grant was funded by the GFFE this year to send an initial group for training. And so with everything that we have on our plate instructionally right now, to have a group of teachers who are motivated enough to say, and we think this helps pull all of that together, we really want to continue to explore this program, is particularly exciting. So to be able to support their request moving forward in the budget is exciting. There's a lot in every year's budget that is directed, whether it's a mandate from the state or whether it's a direction that we're taking as a district, that at times becomes top-down. To support something that is coming from a staff of teachers is an exciting opportunity.
Luke, two questions related to that. So that requested budget item, it's $45,000 or so, is for a report.
No. That $45,000?
Yes.
No.
So
that is specifically for training of professional development of teachers who might, if we adopt the program, would ultimately wind up being IB teachers.
Okay.
The report is in a different line.
And how much is that?
I think we've got $50,000 between that and the enrollment study.
Yes.
Which incidentally, the enrollment study that we did about 10 years ago wound up being significantly more accurate than the state projections. We actually are within a very small
almost
number.
dead on.
Yeah, it's very, very close.
And another question, and maybe we need to see what the report says, but maybe we don't. Are there likely to be additional staffing requirements, or is this a program that is likely to develop existing teachers to deliver this service?
Existing teachers, that would happen with an existing staffing. There'd be no more students coming into the high school as a result of this. So in the same way that we take existing staff members and have them trained to deliver AP courses, we would have to, and again, prepare our teachers to be able to deliver the IB program.
Can I piggyback onto that? Yeah. So as far as additional resources that might be needed beyond, if we decide to move forward with IB, wouldn't be a staffing increase, what additional resources might be needed in terms of cost? If we decide to move forward and implement it.
We're so early in it that we really can't.
I didn't know if you had any
hard
idea.
number. There
Yeah.
are fees for the program,
Right.
As there are
With AP.
Right.
But in whether that's ultimately something we think is a good idea or
But
not.
in the $980,000 that Dr. Freeman was referring to in your last meeting, you do include the phrase instructional materials for high-achieving students. So this is beyond the International Baccalaureate, is it
That's
not?
something else.
Yeah, those monies,
Is that the $45,000?
no, that falls into a separate line. In our special education budget, we have a line for supplies and materials, and if we have a student who has a unique or an unusual need, there's a fund where we can go and we can tap those materials and provide something for that student. We've never carried a similar line item for some of our highest achieving students, and so again, we're making some adjustments in-house for those students while we're going out and asking these outside organizations to come in.
International Baccalaureate.
No, probably for younger students. That dollar amount will probably be more at the elementary or middle level. The IB, I believe, is a natural extension of how we support those high-achieving students at the high school level. Quite honestly, right now, a high school with different level classes tends to be a place where those students find challenge better than they do at the elementary or middle level. Mr. Bloss makes a point that some students who could take more rigorous courses may tend not to because the AP structure isn't something that's inviting to them that fits their learning style. And so I think we've got some students at that high school level who we're not challenging as deeply as we can. IB will help us to do that. But the study and those dollars are more targeted at K through 8. That's where we've been having more of a community conversation about how do we challenge some of our highest achieving students prior to high school years.
And that coordinator that you referenced, it doesn't say what kind of coordinator it is, but that's also within that $981,000.
That's something that we would suggest. We will be creating some release time for one of our teachers and staff, much the way that we do around a department chair. But that would come out of existing staffing. So while earlier versions of our budget showed that as a cost, we're now carrying that out of existing staffing, and I've backed that dollar figure out as a new cost. It'll be covered by existing staffing.
Thank you.
Can I ask Jonathan? Oh, John, go ahead.
First, the tip of the hat to the Board of Education, the superintendent and his staff, and of course the director for special education, Virginia Brown. I think that's quite a monumental achievement that you've gotten the special education costs reined in. Just roughly figure, I think they've been going up about 30% a year for several years. And it's a fine line between some people who are really in need and a tough mandate from the state that's unfunded. But the execution, I believe it's the Bright Connections program.
That's one of the services
Has been phenomenal. And from my understanding, you're providing special education that's more attractive to the community and at a lower cost. So I just consider that to be a great achievement and really a nice part of the budget to see as well. And more than enough to offset all-day kindergarten, for instance. I have a couple of questions. One would be, what is the role of the math coaches? Do they coach the students or the teachers?
Teachers.
The teachers.
Yeah, the whole, and Dr. Freeman obviously has a limited responsiveness to my requests because the calling them coaches is just not as clear as I would like it, given my day job. They really are instructional
That's no slight to
specialists.
coaches in general, right?
Yeah, these are not athletic
developers.
coaches. Yeah, they are instructional specialists to work with teachers to try to offer the teachers the most modern, the most up-to-date, the most effective methods in teaching a particular subject area. And we, as a board, we talked about this in some detail when we were committing to the literacy coaches, if you'll recall, a few years ago. And when we met with the principals of the various schools, the elementary schools in particular, about the effectiveness of the literacy coaches, what do they do? Does it really work? Do the teachers like it? Because originally we were concerned that the teachers didn't want another teacher in the classroom, telling them what to do. And you've got some teachers that have been here for years and years, and this instructional specialist comes in and says, "Well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?" Well, in fact, both in our meetings with the administrators and our meetings with the faculty, they say that the literacy specialists, the literacy coaches, if you will, or the instructional specialists, have really made a major difference in the effectiveness of the teaching. That instead of sending, everybody does professional development in their jobs. We have continuing legal education. Everybody does in their particular areas. Instead of going to a seminar in New York City to learn what's working with math instruction, we have the person who is up to date on the absolute best way, the research and the best way to teach, actually working directly in the classroom with the teachers, not the students. This isn't like a tutor or something giving additional instruction directly to a student. It's saying to the teacher, "Look, I watched you do this. Maybe you think about doing something a little bit differently. Maybe you want to use this as a resource. Maybe," and they again work with the whole professional learning community's model. So it's something that I'm not going to say we were skeptical about it, but we were uncertain about it because we'd never been done here before. On the other, it's been done in lots of other places to great effectiveness, and I'm convinced that after hearing the faculty and the administrators talk about the literacy coaches, that it's worked very, very well. It's embedded professional development. What we were told as part of not just the Common Core, but really moving through the principles of learning, and forget sending teachers out to seminars. That doesn't work. What works is to actually work with them in the classroom to say, here's here's a technique that maybe you ought to think about. I guess that's the theory, is that they're coaches, because it's not dissimilar to coaching a team member. Right. Showing the team member the right way, the best way, the most effective way to, throw a block or to
Now, is there
shoot
an intern savings that will result from this kind of perpetual addition of staff for training where you...
It's a little bit of an offset, I guess I'd put it. We never have spent as much on professional development to say that there's a dollar for dollar offset, but there is significantly less outside professional development than we used to do.
It's an investment in quality. I mean, I don't think that any professional Major League Baseball team would ever consider not having a pitching coach. You need to, your most elite performers still require regular, consistent coaching. Not because they're not already talented, but to remain at the cutting edge and to remain effective. And you don't take your star pitcher and send them out. You have a coach on staff who challenges that person and stretches that person every single day. It's embedded job. It's a local job embedded professional development. They may go in and model a lesson. At times a coach might take the reins for a lesson, but they don't teach and walk out. After they teach, they sit down with that teacher and they say, and what was happening and what was I doing differently and how are you going to? It's about making the teachers the best, the most effective teachers that we can make them.
Okay, a little bit different subject. When we look at an approximation for the cost of an FTE, do you consider the benefits inside that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and now for some of the FTEs, like in the paras, for the paraprofessionals for full-day kindergarten, there is no health benefit because of the way we've structured it. But yes, all of the numbers that we've put in relating to staffing changes reflect health.
That point, I think, requires a little further illumination. There are 12 people who are going to fill para roles.
Half-time para roles.
Half-time para roles.
Yeah, without health benefits, and also that probably, I guess, don't hold me to this, because but I think I'm right, that those are the least well-compensated people in the district. The difference between a certified teacher and a para is a very large number. So I don't want to get carried away with positions.
Right. So, but the distinction I think Jonathan was trying to get to, we're calling it's the equivalent of 6 FTEs without the loaded salary cost associated with an FTE.
Because of the way they're being broken out and distributed. Yes.
I think that's very important.
Whereas the custodial position would include benefits.
Is an FTE.
Yes,
One
right.
more question about staffing. You've reduced staffing at the high school by 1.5 professionals. Where's
certified teachers.
Certified teaching staff.
Yeah, what happened there?
That's not 1.5 people. What that would essentially be is sections distributed across the high school. So it might be one fewer sections of English, one fewer section of math. So the high school principal and his staff will look very carefully at how they're scheduling. And so you might reduce each department by 1 or 2 tenths of a position for a total reduction of 1.5. And that was achieved by a very careful analysis of the high school staff, the high school schedule, and looking at how we can schedule most efficiently.
So the reverse occurs there. We're not losing the full-time equivalent, benefits package in that case.
Right. So we might have a 1.0 retirement in any given department this year that only gets replaced by an 80% staff member, but 80% still draws benefits. And so you will still have associated medical costs with those positions.
So we've had how many retirements?
As of today, on paper, absolutely none. I have not received a single retirement at this time in the teaching
at the high school
contract.
We
just approved one. Yes, we did approve one.
And then obviously Nancy Bishop, the principal at Elite, has announced her retirement, and it's going to be
I use the retirement as the example because it's the pleasantest example. If there were no retirements, it could be a reduction for somebody in their assignment.
Did you have a question? No. Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, one more regarding investments. I saw you had noted that there was a $39,000 increase for site improvements in the capital line, but I was also interested in the $171,000 increase in instructional equipment. And I'm going to just venture to guess a little bit. It looked like about $40,000 was specifically for all-day kindergarten instructional equipment. At least it was for the 40,000 for the lower schools.
No, that's
And it looked like there was about
That was furniture,
130,000
as I recall.
for the upper schools. So I was curious, what kind of instructional equipment are we,
Small people.
is driving the increase?
Instructional equipment year to year can change. It can be anything from a significant piece of machinery in a technology lab to microscopes that need to be replaced on a regular rotating basis in a science lab. I would need to defer to Linda or go back to detail sheets to know specifically what those requests were. I can get those for you, Jonathan, for the next time we meet.
I want to pick up on a point that you made relative to potential impact on enrollments with offering all-day kindergarten. You know, and I can see it in my mind, those enrollment reports, there's always there's a bump between kindergarten and first grade, and
It's historically, I think as a general rule of thumb, we see our first grade enrollment increase by roughly 10% from our kindergarten enrollment. And that's, you know, I think probably parents who either like the rigor of an all-day kindergarten program, if I can put it that way, or that just have daycare issues, right? There is a very large percentage of students that participate in the before or after school programs at the elementary schools. So I'm not sure that that's an answer for all of it, but I think that there are some parents that say, well, we want to have a more structured program. And so we do gain about 10%.
so assuming that 10% materializes, downward to K, class sizes are going to be okay with the number of staff that you've identified here?
Yes, and space available in the buildings. I will put a caveat on that and say that in one of the conversations with the Board of Education, I did note that if class sizes for kindergarten spike beyond what we're projecting, we're looking to keep class sizes smaller than 20. If it does spike beyond that, we might need to create a 13th kindergarten section. That's not unusual. That does happen in grade levels periodically, and we absorb that within whatever our approved budget would be. So if at that time that happens, we'd find a way to absorb that within the budget. It wouldn't be an additional request. And even doing that, even extending to 13 classes would not require any changes in space. We can absorb that in the space at the buildings now. Some principal's going to have to shuffle things around, but we're not going to have to drop a portable. We're not going to have to propose a building project. We would not be coming forward with this kindergarten if we couldn't fit it. And that includes in tandem with the special education. Some of the special education programs we've talked about are space intensive. Supporting some of these students means in smaller class sizes than we've done before. But we're benefiting to some degree from those 4 or 5 years of declining enrollments that we have the opportunity to do this now.
But if you have 12 sections at 19 children, that's 228. This year we have 196. No, I'm sorry. Yes, 196. So we've got some room.
Right.
But
There's your 10%.
right. And okay. And so in 11-12 kindergarten was 225. Okay. So that's about what we expect. And one of the things that we have been repeatedly assured is that this is not going to require a commitment for new space. And that was the foundation of the vote in the Board of Education, that we are not coming back next year and saying we need 2 portables up at Jones or Leet or somewhere else. Not happening.
If you needed to go to 13, would you need to hire a new staff person as well?
Yes, we would, but if that happens at that late time, it would have to be absorbed within whatever approved budget we have at that time.
Anything further? Save your,
Maybe one more.
certainly.
You said you think it might be the right timing for all-day kindergarten. Can you expand upon that a little?
Yeah, sure. We spent a lot of time talking about full-day kindergarten at the board, and I think that really when it came to us, I think there were 9 people who had not made their minds up on it, because we talked about it a few years ago, but it was really just not possible because of the issues relating to space. That was always a deal breaker for us. We are not going to add space to do this, period. This was the first year that we got a commitment from the superintendent, any superintendent, that there would not be space issues. And that's because of a few different things. Enrollment is one. Some work at some of the buildings has been another. But, you know, we looked at the whole issue. We started the same place we always start, and that's with studies. You know, there are hundreds of published studies on full-day kindergarten and the effectiveness, and they are somewhat unsatisfying, I'll have to say, because they don't control for some things that you would think that they would control for, like the effectiveness of the program. You would say, well, don't you want to know how good the teachers are, how good the program is, how good the curriculum is, and when you're trying to determine the efficacy of a full-day kindergarten program. And they don't. They don't control for parents who choose to put their children in a full-day program as opposed to choosing a half-day program. What's the different demographics? What's the different school readiness issues? So, but we did look at a large number of studies, and I think that I don't think that they tilted really anybody one way or the other in terms of a controlling way. We do know more cognitively about how children learn today than we did 10 years ago. We know that language skills are developed at a very early age today. So we think that really investing this kind of time at the kindergarten level is probably going to help in areas like socialization, like language skills, like cognition, like math skills. But, you know, I will tell you that I was very much on the fence after talking to the teachers and the principals and reading the studies until last week. I went up to Melissa Jones School and I sat in on a class. And it was one of the most frustrating things I've ever watched, frankly. And it was with a senior teacher, very experienced teacher, but I think the way I described it at our meeting was it was like a sprint. It was just 10 minutes doing one thing, 10 minutes doing the next thing, 10 minutes doing the next thing, on and on and on, and now it's time to go home. And there was never a time where the teacher was able to sit down with the kids and say, talk to me about, tell me, you know, instead of the teacher speaking to the students, which is the last way we want to teach is the way we're teaching our youngest students, because we don't have time. So we want to give kids time to socialize. We want to give kids time to experiment, learn by exploring. We want to give kids time to write on their own. We want to give our teachers time to perform differentiated instruction. That's been a cornerstone of our teaching model for the last 15 years. When you're talking about a 2-hour program, really not much more than 2-hour program, with 16 or 19 or however many kids, you can't do meaningful differentiated instruction. Teachers spending different amounts of time with different groups, with different focuses and different purposes. I think we have a better understanding now of just how hard it is to do differentiated instruction in the half-day model. I think that one of the other things, I think that we have, arguably, we have a little more budget flexibility this year because of what's happened in the special ed area. You know, I think if let's say that hypothetically we didn't have these savings in special ed, would we bring full-day kindergarten to you with a budget that had an increase of 5.5% increase? I doubt it. I think that you know, I was hopeful that depending on where the health insurance line came in, that we'd be able to come in here to you and say, look, you know, we're not only are we doing full day kindergarten, but we're doing all of these other things, and we have a very small requested increase because the health insurance line is roughly where it was last year. That unfortunately has not happened. But nonetheless, we are here before you with a budget increase that is less than 3%, that has one of the most exciting new programs that we've offered in this district, or considered offering in this district, in the past 15 years. I'm not a big believer in just because everybody else is doing it, we should do it. That's never worked for me, and it doesn't work here. On the other hand, out of the 31 reference group A and reference group B schools that have looked at this, 28 have adopted it. Cheshire, one of the three that has not yet, their Board of Education has proposed it, and it's subject to town council review. Farmington said no, in part, substantial part, I believe, because of space issues. And then we're the third. So while I don't think that is in itself a reason to do this, I think that clearly if there is opposition to it, the people that have the districts that have read the same studies that we've read, that have had the same experience that we've had before adopting it, have all come to the same conclusion. And so I think that there is a compelling argument that the burden is on those who say that it doesn't work to offer a little more proof than they might ordinarily because of the experience with these other high-achieving districts. I know some people want to tie this to the adoption of the Common Core state standards. There is some literature that talks about that. I personally don't think that that's a major driver for me. I think that the major driver for me is good instruction. And we are much more comfortable right now with the best way to teach children and to lead them to learn. And so while I think the Common Core maybe has caused us to focus a little bit on this, I guess, it's just not good teaching what we're doing now. That's really what it boils down to. It's not the best teaching. I think the teacher that I watched up at Jones, she was doing the best she could do under the circumstances, but she was not doing the best she could do. And that is too bad. That's a circumstance that I think we can remedy and we can fix, and we can give these children the advantage of something that is working all over the state, all over the country. More than 4 out of 5 kids now are in a full-day kindergarten program in the state of Connecticut. We still our per-student spending is still substantial, it's still 84th in the state. Our per capita tax burden is still 46th in the state. This isn't going to materially change it one way or the other. So that's why, at least I'm speaking for myself, not for the entire board, that's why I think that the time has come, and that this is a year that we can take advantage of some of the other budget issues and move this forward.
Any other questions? Mike?
Bonding. We haven't voted on bonding yet, but what we are likely to move forward is either 1 or 2 items relating to the Adams window and door replacement, not dissimilar. This is what we voted to engineer a year ago, and now it's been engineered, and so now we are ready to do the work. But that's replacing the windows and the doors in the second oldest part of the building. And also some significant security upgrades at Adams. That's a building that was obviously designed in a different era in terms of security, and we need to try to re-engineer the front to try to make it more secure. And also, there would the second bond would be doing some effectively just health and safety improvements, security improvements at 4 of the other schools. So we'll have those to you in time. I think the rough numbers that we've been talking about are $2 million for the Adams project and $1 million for the security improvements at the other 4 schools, roughly. That's right.
Anything further?
I had just one quick.
Sure.
Complementary evaluation.
Could you just go into that in a little more detail?
Yes. The new teacher and administrator evaluation requirements that have been rolled out statewide. This year, we had the opportunity to begin a phase-in opportunity. So we've got new requirements for how we evaluate all certified staff members. We rolled it in place. We rolled it out this year with just 1/3 of the staff. Next year, we are still, even considering the idea of slowing it down, but we're still currently expected to go from 1/3 to 100% of all of our certified staff for next year. Last year, we did add 1 administrative position to the administrative ranks in the area of special education, and some degree in preparation for this increased workload. But as we're looking at our experience this year, and as I'm debriefing with my principals, they're telling me two things. They're telling me that they're having some of the best, most effective instructional conversations that they've had with their staff in a very long time. So they like the focus that this is placing on instruction. On the other hand, they're also recognizing that the takeaway from their time is significant. If we do some rough numbers, we've got our administrators spending more than 1/3 of all of their school days doing nothing but teacher observation and evaluation. So the plan allows for us to supplement our in-house administrative staff by bringing in experienced administrators who can pick up some of the observational component for our in-house administrators. So if I'm a teacher who requires 3 observations, my principal might do 2 of those 3, but we can bring in an experienced administrator who knows instruction well, who we think is a good fit with our district to do one of those. It's called complementary because, in fact, I think it may add some depth to the evaluation. The idea of having the same person watch me 3 times every year, or bringing in somebody else with a more objective viewpoint to contribute to that evaluation. So those monies are set aside at the middle and elementary level only to be used as contracted monies for those outside administrators should it be necessary. Right now, and I give them all the credit in the world for this, the principals are still pushing back and saying that I know that I can figure out a way to do this. Those are my teachers and I want to be the person to support my staff. But I need to make sure that I've got a release valve, and if I find an administrator who needs the support, that we've got the ability to bring in those outside evaluators. We're not looking to do that at the high school level because we're looking to train our department chairs to be able to do that. We've got a number of department chairs who have administrative certification. As long as we train them in the new plan, they can do some of that lift. And again, I see that as enriching our plan. If I'm a science teacher and I know that my principal's going to watch me twice, but the chair of the science department is going to be there doing one of those observations for me as well, I think I actually feel more confident. I think I'm feeling a little less stressed about the process, knowing that I've got somebody who knows me as a teacher and knows my subject area as well as my department head. Those were not in the earliest version of my budget, which was prepared really in early October, and as I've watched the year unfold, I've become more concerned about the level of time and effort that's going to be required and needed to bring that as a late addition to make sure that we had the capacity.
And having said all that, there is little that is in as much flux right now as the whole teacher evaluation issue. What's it going to look like on July 1st? I don't think anybody knows.
It's an election year after all, isn't it?
Well, it is, it's something we did, Senator Meyer and Representative Woodlitz and Mr. Candelora from North Branford were at our last meeting, and we I think clearly conveyed to them that we really are okay evaluating our teachers without their help, and I think they appreciated the comments. I think that they're trying. Yeah, it was a very good meeting, and I think that we continue to work to make clear to those who are overseeing us that we would like to try to do it a different way.
It is worth noting that we didn't adopt the state plan. So when the state put out the guidelines, they also put out an off-the-rack evaluation plan. We do not use the off-the-rack plan in Guilford. We created our own in-house system that I believe is better and better for our staff, that meets the guidelines but doesn't match the off-the-rack model. And it's just a heavy lift. So there are very positive components, but we would have designed something better if we weren't tied so closely to even the guidelines.
Anything further? Thank you very much for the presentation. We look forward to seeing you at the Board of Finance public hearing on the budget, which I think is the 4th? March 4th, yeah. Good.
Thank you for all the time tonight.
Thank you. Item 7, receive proposed town budget for fiscal year 2014-2015. Joe, it happened to...
Switching the tapes before we get going.
Exactly.
Just take a brief.
Let's take, 5 minutes